Now I will proceed with the introduction. As we know that the world now heading into the era of modernization, thus the corruption also become the highlighted issue in most of countries. Corruption happens when there is a person who have power for his own personal profit. The corruption can happen in public sector and also the private sector. Therefore, in Malaysia, there is one agency called Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission (MACC) to overcome the issue of corruption. Next, we move to the background of the issue. According to the case study, Malaysia ranking in Transparency International Corruption Perception Index 2021 has dropped. According to Dr. Muhammad Mohan, the president of Transparency International Malaysia, Malaysia has scored 48 points. In this index, the less the number, the more corrupt the country. Then, he also said that the MACC had not done any progress since 2015 and also lack of action that taken to against the people such as public officers who had abused their position are the reason why the corruption issue in Malaysia increased. Among all the drawbacks in MACC, there also some positive development happened, like the Memorandum of Understanding, which was signed by our Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob with Pakatan Harapan on September 13, 2021. This memorandum is about the political stability. Thus, it's important because anti-hopping law will be tabled in the parliament. Next, the information like International Corruption Index must be shared to the public and also the data of all public contracts, said Mohan. By applying the international standard of integrity in government procurement, it will give the good transparency and governance.
Hello, I am Manisha. Now I will present the significance of Transparency International Corruption Perception Index that we can adopt for Malaysian public finance. Firstly, it can help the government to close the gap between rich and poor people. As we know, corruption can cause poverty. This is happen because corruption can affect income inequality from various aspects such as a biased tax system, poor targeting of social program and asset ownership. In the tax system, rich people always get tax evasion and exemption because of favor the well-connected and wealthy population groups. This can lead to the gap between rich and poor people. Therefore, the government can use the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index as a guideline to detect corruption and close the gap between rich and poor people. Next, the significance of this index is can help Malaysia public finance to handle the problem with the country development. There are so many cases regarding corruption in Malaysia that have affected our country development in economic and social, such as Sabah State Water Department. Therefore, this index can help Malaysia with the global strategy against corruption by setting the goal, such as checks and balance, enforcement, and other to be a guide for Malaysian public finance to handle problems regarding corruption in Malaysia. Last but not least, the significance of this index is can help Malaysia to reduce the likelihood of corruption behavior by allowing scrutiny and monitoring the corruption case. It is important to monitor the issue that include the allocation and finance to ensure our country prevent the difficulties such as high debt that can hurt our country, such as the eligibility to take out loans in the future. Therefore, Malaysian public finance need to join the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index for the significance of our country being free from the corruption in the future. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sinajawai and I will talk about the factor that contribute to the drop of Malaysia's position in public sector corruption. There are several factors contribute to the dropping of Malaysia's position in public sector corruption. Firstly, Malaysia dropped 5 spots from 51 to 62 out of 180 countries was due to the store institutional reform. Institutional reform happened when Malaysia first changes in federal government in 2018, in which after Pakatan Harapan win in general election against Barisan Nasional. The reformation started in which requiring the members of parliament to declare their asset publicly. However, there are also store reformation in which was the reformation of human rights in Malaysia in terms of freedom of expression and freedom of speech. Then, the progress on the reform to the Malaysia Anti-Corruption Commission recommendation. There is no action were made by the government in the reform of MACC to make an amendment for any change of law and policy to eradicate the corruption. Besides that, the Dr. Muhammad Mohan stated that there was on discharge not amounting to the acquittal for the high-profile personality in corruption cases. It was conviction and sentence of discharge not amounting to an acquittal DNAA in criminal law. It was when the prosecution decided to not proceed with the prosecuting the accused and continue the cases. For example, Riza Aziz has been granted DNAA in his cases involving money laundering and funding One Malaysia Development Berhad.
Next, lack of political will in administrations to eradicate corruptions. According to the case study by Kepler and Mohammed, it mentions that the members of political in Malaysia has low level of fighting corruptions. This is due to the unwillingness to tackle corruptions issue that happens in the political. Not only that, the case study also pointed out that the Malaysian political has a poor implementations of reform policy making. Let's take example, the establishments of the National Bureau of Investigation, or also known as the NBI, that has been replaced by the Anti-Corruption Agency (ACA) due to the weaknesses of the ACA. However, the NBI has been abolished due to the same weaknesses as the ACA. This is due to the unable of Malaysian political in finding the roots of causes of corruptions. Hence, there is not enough an effort that have been made by Malaysian political in combating corruptions in Malaysia. Furthermore, there is no action and progress in the amendment of Whistleblower Protection Act 2010. Whistleblower Protection Act 2010 is an act that encourages of the disclosure of information regards on the corruptions and the misconducted by the public officials. Therefore, this act will provide the whistleblower protections against any other disclosure or having detrimental effects. However, there are several amendments that needed to be made for the betterment of this act. According to the case study by Leong, it mentions that to increase the level of protections for the whistleblower. This will ensure long protections for the whistleblowers and security of the identifiers is well secure. Secondly, the independence of the Act. The Act must remain vulnerable to the ministerial actions and indeed to be made entirely independent as such influence. Hence, no interference from other organizations that may leak the informations. However, there is no actions and progress in the amendments of the Whistleblower Protection Act 2010 that has led to the increasing of the corruptions in the public sector. Lastly, discipline problem and misuse of power amongst the high authority. The discipline problem and the misuse of power amongst the high authority in Malaysia are increasing from time to time. The issue of transparency and lack of enforcement has led to the breach of trust happens to the public officials. Take example, a member of political, Dato' Xavier Jayakumar, corruption case which involved money laundering to sum up to 1.2 million and also political defections corruptions. However, till this day, there is no law enforcement action were taken against Xavier Jayakumar, according to Malaysia Today.
In conclusion, Transparency International Corruption Index (CPI) clearly important and had an influence in Malaysia public finance. This index will make the Malaysian government to increase their effort in combating the corruption. corruption need to be avoided from happening in our country. This is because corruption will give many negative effects toward the people and the country, especially if the corruption happen in public sector administration.